To start, let's go ahead and do um, refuge of bodhicitta and the four immeasurables. And, before we do that, sometimes it's nice when we come into these settings to really get in touch once again with our own personal aspirations for studying and practicing. With refuge, we're really cultivating a connection with reliable sources of guidance and support. And in generating bodhicitta, we're really refreshing our mind that's committed to thorough and complete spiritual development for the benefit of others. So, however you like to kind of emphasize that in your own mind, and I will search for where is the share screen? It seemed to be, oh, it's down at the bottom. There we go. I'm going to do this one. So, bringing to mind all of our sources of spiritual support. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And also to do our little part of generating these four immeasurables to really create a small impact on ourselves and our environment. We can recite them together. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Okay. Whatever small bit we can do, right? So, to those of you here who were here last week, welcome back. Thanks for coming again. And for those of you who aren't, welcome. Just as a brief review, the purpose of studying and practicing mindfulness is to gradually affect positive change in our mind, right? So that's the positive change in our mind and positive change on our spiritual path. Positive change in the sense that we're reducing suffering and its causes and increasing the positive qualities of awareness, love, compassion, wisdom, whatever our spiritual aspirations are, right? So the gradual change is brought about through repeated engagement, that is mind training, specifically with the causes to bring about this reduction in suffering and an increase in our intended results. That's the big project. Mindfulness plays an important part. We discussed a little bit about mindfulness and its the way the Gaelic tradition views it. I wanted to use a different definition from a different Gaelic source today, just because, when you look at different definitions or ways that people articulate it, sometimes you get a little slightly different angle on it, and that can really help as we collect those. They can help fill out our sense of what it is. So this definition is from Choden Rinpoche's Mastering Meditation. It's the glossary definition. And there's the person who did this translation and probably did this glossary as well is Venerable Tenzin Gache, he's on his way to becoming a Larampa Geshe. So he's a Westerner, very, very astute. The book is fantastic if you're interested in calm abiding meditation, and Mahamudra as well. It's a really great resource. So Tenzin Gache, he translates mindfulness as recollection, And he says, recollection, often translated as mindfulness, is a mental factor that observes an object with which one is familiar and has the aspect of non-forgetfulness, and whose function is to prevent distraction from that object. In the context of meditation, it's the factor that keeps the objective support in mind without slipping into forgetfulness or distraction. Okay. I wanted to bring this one up in particular. The first part is the familiar three aspects that we had talked about before, but this aspect of keeps the objective support. So that's the object basically. And it keeps it in mind without slipping into forgetfulness or distraction, right? This is a nice way of articulating one of the modes that we can actually move out of our mindfulness of our object, right? The mindfulness can slip away. We can forget it or we can get distracted. Those two sometimes are interwoven, right? Um, Sometimes the forgetfulness comes and then the distraction is like, hey, I'm here. Now I've got something else to have my mind on. So I just thought this was an interesting way to articulate what mindfulness is. We also did a couple of meditations, one on the mindfulness of the body cultivated through touch. So we touched various parts of our body, just tried to keep our awareness on the intersection between our hand and whatever other body part we were touching. And then we did one as well on the breath, a simple one on the breath, where we kind of emphasized like the cultivation of ease and awareness as we're being mindful of our object. And Mary Jo had raised a question that I'll actually get to later um, in this session. So, does anybody have anything that has come up or any questions that we can put on the table at this point? Yeah, Teresa.
Sorry, I didn't know how to unmute myself. Um, I've had this uh, reoccurring dizziness for years, and it's if anyone's had dizziness, they know that being around a really busy environment is very makes it worse. So I've been trying to develop something that's directly talking about what we're doing. Before
Mhm.
I go into a grocery store or something like that, I sit in the car and I really quiet my mind. I focus on going to the store. And then I found sometimes it just like I look at my hands. I really focus on my hands, you know? There's been times when I've gone into the store and played like I'm one of those people that's looking at their phone and I'm not really looking at my phone. I'm just using that. Um, so I'm wondering, when we're talking about the object, if it's something like is that why people wear beads to kind of focus on those? I think I'm just trying to explore the object and calming our minds.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so the object can, in meditation, the object can be a wide variety of things. Partly depends on what our purpose for practicing is. From what you're saying, one, I want to say I'm sorry that you're going through a lot of dizziness and you've been doing it for a long time. It sounds awful. Um, and it also sounds like you're trying to explore things that can help you stabilize your mind and maybe experience the dizziness less. Is that yeah, you're nodding your head, yes. Okay. So, um, it turns out there are all sorts of objects that can help us with all sorts of different things. The tradition, as far as I'm aware of, doesn't say, oh, when we're experiencing these sorts of physical symptoms, this is an object that we should use for meditation, right? Um, so you're it seems like you're branching out from what the tradition might say, but that's totally fine. We have to figure out what sort of tools we have and then learn how to use them as best we can, right? So it's great that you're finding something to be able to, it seems like, help your attention stabilize and maybe connect with your body a little bit. And that helps with, helps you navigate a situation that normally is sort of, I'll use inflammatory, right? It creates more anxiety or more um, instance of dizziness, right? So, um, so I think it's great that you're using um, initially a little breath meditation to try to settle your body, settle your nervous system, and then also finding something that you have access to be able to help stabilize as well. In the practice of mindfulness, or the cultivation of mindfulness, we can use a really wide variety of objects, right? We can use something that's physical touch. We can use something initially that starts as um, something we're physically looking at deeper levels of concentration that needs to turn into an internal, a mental image. But initially, it can be something physical. It could be a physical statue of a Buddha or a painting, or um, to be honest, it could be any variety of things. It doesn't even have to be something that's Buddhist related. There's benefits to a Buddha and things like that. And if you read through the tradition's description of the various types of objects, you can get a little bit more information about that. But when we are cultivating concentration, in general, the teaching is to be able to either have one of our teachers give us an object, somebody that really knows us well and has a deep sense of these practices. They can sometimes offer an object for us, or we can find one ourselves, right? In the cultivation of concentration, bouncing between objects isn't the best thing, right? Because we've got to get familiar with each of those objects. And as we do that on a deeper level, if we switch, then we have to go through the process of getting familiar again, right? So, um, in terms of mindfulness itself, I think as we are beginners and we're learning our way, we can have a primary object of concentration. But any time that we're cultivating this ability of our mind to just be stable and aware can be a practice, right? So we might have our breath as our concentration object, right? Or an image of a Buddha. But when we're talking with one of our close friends about a subject that's important or valuable, or if we just want to experiment, we can really try to tune in and be attentive to what they're saying and allow the other things that are on the peripheral of our awareness to sort of fade away, right? So we can be paying attention to what they're saying and really tuned into them. And that could be considered a practice of mindfulness as well, right? So what I'm saying is, like, have our object of concentration if you want to do concentration practice, shamatha practice, calm abiding practice, but also be able to look for opportunities where, even if it's just a few moments um, of intentional attention, right? Like, we're bringing our mind to pay attention. It might be observing a flower that we see out on a walk, right? Could be something like that. Could be the birds. Um, it could be anything. It could be, we hear some noise that's startling and then we pay attention to our mind for a moment, like how it was reacting or responding, right? So there are many, many places that we can apply the practice of um, being attentive to our object, being not forgetful of it. So not letting our mind become distracted by it, or by something else, right? Or having it move away. And we don't need to be heavy-handed about this, right? It can just be like, hey, I'm curious to explore doing this practice a couple extra times during the day with the taste of my tea, or, you know, the next sound that comes in, let me, like, be attentive to that. right? So we get to play with it a little bit, right? Does that kind of approach your question, Teresa? Yeah, you're nodding yes.
And I guess what I was wondering is, like, can you do something as simple as looking at your own hands? I mean, can you, because that goes with you everywhere. I mean, does it have to be an object or could you just be really focused on like your nail or I guess I'm asking something that can always be with me and not
Yeah,
in my imagination.
yes. And you can do that, and that would be considered your object. What we're talking about is what the mind is attending to at the time. It could be a physical part of your body, it could be something that's external to your body, it could be something internal, right? Some emotion, some image, some thought, you know. So, yeah, so object is a broad term for what we're trying to hold in mind, basically. Yeah, yeah, thanks for asking. Okay. Anything else or anything about anything I just said? Okay. So, the first topic for today is mindfulness and introspection. Um, so, once again, mindfulness keeps the object or the objective support in mind without slipping into forgetfulness or distraction. So, it keeps it in mind, holds it there. We can strengthen mindfulness through deepening our familiarity with the object. So, we can study if our hand is our object, or yeah, we can just use our hand. We can pay more attention to the various contours in it, and we can get more and more familiar with it. Or maybe using the image of a Buddha is good for this too. Initially, we might start with just looking at the face or looking at the overall structure, and then we start to zoom in and then back out a little bit to hold what we've kind of gathered a little bit more familiarity with, and then hold the whole. And as we do that over and over again, we can get more familiarity with it. We can have more detail on what it is that we're attending to, and our mindfulness becomes strengthened as a result of that. So they also say that mindfulness can be developed to where our attention naturally gravitates towards the object. Hang on one quick sec, Mary Jo. Let me finish this and I'll come back to your question, okay? So the idea is that as we've gotten familiar with our object, when we go to place our mind on it, our mind just kind of zooms in really easily, right? This isn't the sort of attention where it's not that our attention's naturally gravitating towards our phone or something like that, right? That's caused by a different thing. It happens. But it's a different sort of situation. Here we're talking about having cultivated a decent amount of familiarity. And as we start our practice, the mind is just right there, right? The object is just right there without any real effort to speak of. Okay. Question is, how do we get there? But I'd like to invite Mary Jo to speak um, before we go on.
Thank you. I'm a little bit out of sync. This is kind of relating to the first area you were talking about, objects, including emotions. And that kind of surprised me. I think of emotions as, I guess I've always looked at them as something to kind of see the fluid nature of them coming and going and trying to look at that more than see them as a permanent or staying or whatever like that. So I guess that a little bit just confused me. And I don't know if this is a time that you can say something about it. But if so, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. Um, Emotions are a tricky thing in Tibetan Buddhism. Some people say that they don't exist in it. Um, what I was referring to with emotion, like having mindfulness of our emotions, is simply being aware of the emotional state that's operative in our mind at that particular time and just observing it, right? So this isn't trying to cultivate concentration on the emotions so much, right? It's just, oh, this is what's arising in my mind right now. And I can tune into that. I can be aware of that. And I can watch its impermanence. I can, there's all sorts of additional analytical work we can do with it after we've gained a little familiarity with it through being mindful of it, right? So that's kind of the sense that I was trying to use when I brought up emotions about something you can be mindful of, right? So it's like it's kind of anything that comes into our awareness can be an object that we are paying attention to, right? And we can extend the duration of that attention some, as long as we can. Sometimes not as long as we want, sometimes longer than we want, right? Just by virtue of the situation. But um, I think paying this is my statement, not so much from the Gaelic tradition. I think paying attention to our emotions and being familiar with them and how they arise is a worthwhile thing in terms of getting to know our own minds, right? That's my own view of this kind of stuff. So thanks for raising the question. I think it's valuable. Okay. So
Thank
so we look to strengthen our mindfulness by deepening our familiarity with our object. There's other techniques we can use, but one of the really important things that can help us with that is the mental factor that's called introspection. So it's a mental factor. It's not. I don't want to get into like the Buddhist psychology of minds and mental factors. That's a whole different topic of study. But they consider it to be a mental factor that comes alongside of mindfulness. They're really not conjoined. They're distinct, but they're really tightly tied together. And introspection is considered a mental factor that maintains awareness of the contents of our consciousness, especially whether or not our afflictions have arisen or whether they're present. So, afflictions in this particular sense, in the scope of what we're talking about right now, is simply our forgetfulness or distraction, right? They're afflictions in the sense that they are not what we want to be doing. We're not looking for our mind to move away from our object of our object of mindfulness, right? So if our mind gets distracted or we forget our object, then it's introspection, this awareness of how our mind is doing. I don't know what the right word, like the awareness of the quality of our mindfulness um, allows us to recognize, oh, my mind has slipped completely away and I'm thinking about baseball instead of um, my meditation object, you know, or, oh, I see the murmurs of something coming up. This is more advanced in our concentration practice, right? But I see the murmur of something coming up that could disturb the quality of my concentration. So sometimes introspection is talked about as a spy that operates from the corner of your mind. So the idea is that there's a part of our mind that can monitor what's going on without distracting our mindfulness. and without compromising the quality of that mindfulness, right? I've been searching for examples of some of these, and it's like maybe I came up with one. Sometimes when we're driving a car, if we're focused on staying on the road, there's something that comes up that kind of catches our attention, but we're quickly able to bring our mind back to the activity of driving, right? It's kind of it's you know it's the quality of introspection to recognize the mind has shifted off of focusing on what's happening in the activity of driving to that billboard or whatever. It's not the best example because many of us, I see people here who have maybe been driving for many years. So some of this is kind of automatic, you know, but um, the basic idea is that, oh yes, like there's an aspect of the mind when we're focusing on our object that can pay attention to whether it's still on our object or not. So this is in This is from the Science and Philosophy in Indian Buddhist Classics, Volume 2, which is a volume edited by Thupten Jinpa. Um, and there they say, whatever the mind is engaged in, one needs a method both to prevent it from wandering away from the main object of focus and to recognize whether it's wandering away or not. So there needs to be a method that prevents it from wandering away from the main object and one to be able to recognize whether it's wandering away or not. The first is a function of mindfulness. The second is a function of introspection, or in this translation, it's called meta awareness. That's Thupten Jinpa's preferred translation for introspection. That's almost paraphrased from the Lamrim Chenmo, from Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, where he basically says, you know, concentration refers to attaining attention remaining one pointedly on an object. We need a technique to prevent our attention from getting distracted, and we need to know whether distraction has happened or not, right? Again, paraphrasing. That's not how Tsongkhapa wrote it. So the application of mindfulness and introspection, they go together, is talked about with respect to stabilizing meditation, that is like calm abiding. It's also talked about in terms of activities in the world, which comes along the lines of our conduct of our body, speech, and our mind. This is part of the area where they talk about it a little bit more when the afflictions arise, right? So we're part of the training in mindfulness in the tradition is to be aware of the sorts of activities we should undertake and aware of the ones that we should leave behind or the ones we should disengage. And mindfulness and introspection serve a function in keeping our mind on the ones that we should engage with and letting go of the ones that we should let go of, right? So they can be active. Mindfulness and introspection can be operative in our daily activities in the world because, why not? They use an example of these two as, somebody that has has a wound, goes into a large gathering of people, and they are really careful to protect themselves, right? So there's initial awareness of their body in relation to all of the people that are around them. And then if the mind slips away or if something happens, then their mind comes back to that, the introspection, their self-awareness comes back to like, oh, I'm trying to protect myself, right? There's also, they use some colorful examples that have to do with like hurting people or something like that. So I tried to think of another one. It's like, oh, if we're in, this again is in a big crowd of people, right? If we know we have our keys on us and we hear our keys dropped out of our pocket, immediately we're going to try to pick them up in a big crowd of people, right? So we've got this is again, it's not a great example. It's just one where we bring our mind back to something that's important to us, right? Which is maintaining our keys in that example. Not the best example. I'm curious if somebody has another one. Hold off for 1 second on that. Kind of finish this. Um, so mindfulness and introspection together help us direct our mental energy and attention to something of our choice rather than moving our mind moving on the basis of a less conscious pattern of action or reactivity. We'll talk on this a little bit more later. But I wanted to share a quote from Shantideva's Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds, which comes from chapter 5, line 23. He says, "To those who wish to guard the mind, I join my palms together and pray. Make every effort to guard mindfulness and meta awareness." So guard our mindfulness and introspection if we want to protect our minds. Questions? Better examples?
Yeah.
Yes, Teresa.
I think when I'm just trying to be empty or not having a million ideas running around, you find yourself, something comes in and you just say, oh, there you are. Okay, go away. You're just recognizing something comes in and then goodbye. Is it something like that?
Yeah, it's the recognizing something that comes in part rather than something comes in and then you immediately engage it, right? And pick it up. And your mind really shifts to attending to that. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just not part of our cultivation of mindfulness if we're using a particular object for it, right? You know. So yeah, so it's cultivating this awareness. Introspection is cultivating this awareness of how our mind is engaging with our object and the quality of that engagement. Whether the mind has moved away to something else entirely, or as we move deeper, and we'll talk about this a little later, as we move deeper into concentration practice, what's the quality of that observation? You know, is it dull? Is it too bright? Is our mind just like having trouble being at ease and stabilizing? You know, none of these are bad things, right? But they are things that we can be aware of and then try to work with to cultivate whatever our aspirations in meditation are, right? Or our aspirations in the practice of mindfulness might be to bring more stability and ease, right? So if our mind is really jittery, then being aware of that quality can help us merely accept it. That's a great initial starting place, right? But then if there's something that we feel like we can do about it, that, you know, it's taking 3 deep breaths or, you know, whatever it might be, then we can apply that sort of antidote and then see how the mind responds to it. Yeah. Anything else?
I think I have a problem with mindfulness in the sense that with mindfulness, when I'm meditating and I have to make myself concentrate on the breath and I bring myself back to the breath and I bring myself back to the breath, I can make myself go back to the breath instead of doing my shopping list. But if I'm in my day and my so like I wake up in the morning and I try to have a motivation and my motivation has recently been I want to be mindful. And so like I can day and I can pay attention to my quote unquote body, speech, and mind, trying not to say the wrong thing or think the wrong thing or and I'm not saying wrong thing. I, I so reacting to one of my kids instead of being snarky, I want to be mindful not to be snarky. It's really hard. So that so the so it's not that I'm being mindful of my breath at that point. It's the constant like thinking of like, okay, I'm trying not to do this. I'm having more difficulty with that part than sitting quietly for three. Granted, don't get me wrong, sitting quietly for 3 minutes and trying to exclusively think about breathing is hard, but the other part's harder.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the practical example. And I agree with you. It is harder to um, keep our mind attentive to our values would be one way to articulate it, right? Um, as we're moving around in the world, especially, I mean, we just have so many ways that our attention is getting pulled in so many different directions, right? Um, so I think it can be important to give ourselves a lot of space around that and to look to reinforce the times that we actually have a little success with it. You know, rejoicing is a great medicine. It can be in our own actions or the actions of others as well, right? So we're looking for the positive feedback loop in terms of like, oh, this is really hard. It seems almost impossible in some ways or at some days. And wow, I had a little improvement there, right? A little step. So, um, I feel like there's more to say, but I don't know what it is right now. So I really appreciate you sharing about that. And maybe we'll come to that. Eventually, we'll talk a little bit about more dealing um, with distraction and dullness, and maybe something like that'll come back into the conversation at that point. So, okay. So I do see time is moving. So let's go ahead and do our first meditation for this session, which is basically going to be a body scan meditation. Um, it may be a little abbreviated based on our time, but that is going to be okay. Um, let's see. What we're trying to do is simply be aware. I'll cue different parts of our body that we can pay attention to. And the practice is simply being aware of what our sensation or what our experience in relation to that part of the body is. If our mind moves away from that part of the body, particularly if it ends up in a conceptual rumination, we start thinking about something, then we simply want to bring it back to the sensation as well, right? So that would be the function of introspection, recognizing that the mind has moved off of our simple awareness of whatever part of the body we're cueing. And then the mindfulness is the bringing it back. Okay. So ahead of time, we don't need to do anything with the sensations that we experience, right? That's a little precursor, a little way of front loading and saying, oh, my mind doesn't have to go after anything that shows up. Uh, Distraction will be normal. We might get drowsy. I'm just reading through a couple of other parts here. Um, yeah, we're just returning our attention back. Okay. So find your comfortable meditation seat. Could be lying down, could be standing, whatever position is most comfortable for you. On your next exhale, release any tension you have. And bring your awareness to the crown of your head. And simply notice if you can feel anything there. Not, that's okay. Just keep your awareness in that general area. And from your crown, you can bring your awareness down to your forehead and face. Noticing any sensations. Gently sweep your awareness to your neck, front or back. And down to your shoulders. And staying present with any sensations that are arising there. Notice if your mind has slipped away, some other part of your body. And gently bring it back. Scanning your attention down from your shoulders into your chest and back, your general torso. And settle on whatever it is that has your attention with regard to your torso. and release that awareness and move it down to our hips and our seat. Continue on to our thighs and knees. Down to our calves and ankles. So any sensation, can bring our mind to that. Then down to our feet, and our toes. Attentive to whatever it is that we can be aware of here. Release this body scan. And we can dedicate the benefit that we've cultivated through this simple practice of awareness to being able to further develop our awareness, our mindfulness, and introspection, and accomplishing our spiritual goals. Sometimes with these body scan meditations, we can consciously release tension that we find. Which I think could be a great practice, helps relax the body and the mind. Also, just being aware of our body in this way, like really tuning into it, can be healing for our mind and body connection and communications. This can be really beneficial for us. So it can be worthwhile to do whenever. Is there anything anybody would like to share about their experience in this brief little body scan? Yeah. Yes, Mary Jo.
Well, I found I was surprisingly devoid of any of feeling really much. I don't have, I'm lucky right now. I don't seem to have pain. Well, I have some in my foot, but I couldn't feel it. It's only when I walk. And I was rather surprised. I thought, wow, am I just numb? You know? Um, so, if I have a sensation from external, like even my own hand on my arm, for example, feel that. But from the inside out, I was surprised
Hmm.
about the absence of much feeling, really.
Yeah. Have you done body scan meditations before, or was this the first time for you?
I have done them before. It's not a part of my general practice or weekly or monthly. Um, but I have done them before, yes.
Yeah. Did did you have sensations you could experience in those ones, or is this kind of just a real new experience for you?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. It's something I don't spend a lot of time doing. No,
Mhm.
but it's I mean, like I didn't feel the blood moving in my vessels, or uh, there's where I'm sitting. There's not any breeze, so I didn't feel that kind of tactile sensation. So I don't know. I guess I'm curious about what kind of things other people did feel that I might feel someday.
Yeah, sometimes it can simply be some tingling in a place, some heaviness in some part of our body. We could feel it's like some sweatiness or heat. There could be coldness that's felt. So, there's just kind of a range of things that, like, oh, like I'm tuning in right now. I mean, like last week, Teresa said, "Oh, we were doing this meditation and her body got hot," right? So it's like that could be localized, right? It could be on an acupoint in some, part of your hand, right? Like there's something that's coming up once we start tuning in. So, um, this isn't a good, better, bad, not, and there's no judgment around any of this stuff. We're simply cultivating the mind that's able to tune in and to pay attention, and then to be able to move that attention to something else, because in that process, we're refreshing our ability, or we're doing it again, moving our mind to something and paying attention, moving our mind to something and paying attention. There's some continuity in our body, right? But it is a skill, and it's a slow, gentle training of like attending, moving the object slightly, moving it slightly, right? So, or at least the location of it. We're still body senses, right, in general. So, Um, I'll rejoice in the no pain, um, but I won't say it was no gain either. So I don't know. I gained something from talking about it, so thank you. Um, so maybe my time management hasn't been great. It's almost 8 o'clock, so I might rush through. We'll see. This working with dullness and distraction. So dullness and distraction are two of the main topics for calm abiding meditation, but we're going to talk about them just a little bit more generally here. Dullness is a sense where we've lost the alertness or the vividness of our attention. This could manifest as drowsiness or sleepiness. It could manifest as just like drifting out, like spacing out. So, kind of not so much something else has come to occupy our attention, but we've just kind of like gone into the ether a little bit. There can also be some fogginess or darkness with regard to the object that we're observing. This again comes a little later in concentration mostly, but it's worth talking about. So there can be like there's a little bit of a cloud cover, some kind of like something that's obscuring the relief or the real details of whatever we're observing. So the mind in this case is not as clear and aware as it can be. An analogy would be like a dirty lens or an unfocused camera, right? So um, the the mind lacks vibrancy and lacks a certain degree of energy in its engagement with the object, right? That's a really brief overview of dullness. Distraction is movement of our attention away from our object of mindfulness. This is usually due when it's coming up internally due to excess energy in the mind. So our mind has got a lot of energy that prevents the attention from settling and stabilizing on our object. Right? Sometimes it's due to observing something else that comes into our awareness. So, like, there could be a loud noise, or we could have a memory of a well-dressed person that we saw in the tea shop yesterday come into our mind. Right? So it becomes distraction when the mind has subtly or more grossly like lost its object. So the mind latches on to that experience and then it stays with it, you know. Maybe a thunderstorm would be a good example, right? Hard to stay on our object of observation if we have thunder and lightning very close at hand. For most of us, well, I won't say most of the time. I'll just say for me, hard to do that, you know. I get interested in the thunderstorm, which is okay, and then I get to practice with that sort of input. This kind of distraction is similar when we forget what we're doing, we forget what we're talking about, we've lost our mindfulness. So if we were in a close conversation with our friend and something came up into our mind that was a complete non sequitur, is like something completely different than what we were talking about, right? It's not to say that that thing that came up was a bad thing. It's just we've lost our mindfulness in the conversation. So our mind is dynamic in the sense that it can move very quickly between objects, right? This is something that's built into our mind and our biology to a certain degree, right? It's quite valuable in terms of keeping us safe, right? If we were always locked in, like really locked in on things, we'd have trouble functioning out in the world unless the lock in was able to take all of that in, which is kind of a promise of the tradition in a way, right? The full development of mind is able to take in everything that's going on at once without any kind of a problem. It's amazing to contemplate that. But for most of us, when I go out into a public place, I may be focused on something, but my mind is able to take in other information that's going on and move around. So I don't expect myself to be really single pointedly focused, right? One of the things that we try to be aware of with distraction is we've got a very complex mind. And even as we're trying to focus on our object or to keep mindfulness on our breath, for example, there's some thought that comes in that isn't really relevant to what we're focusing on. It might be a thought that we've had 14 times earlier in the day. You know, sometimes we end up, due to our previous actions and patterns of actions, sometimes due to our environment and other things, we end up in consistent patterns of thought and attention that aren't supportive of our aspirations with mindfulness, right? Sometimes we sit down to rest or meditate, and the stream of thoughts that we're all too familiar with comes to play. Do we really want to think about that challenging moment that remains unresolved with our coworker again? But we don't really have so much control over its arising in our mind, right? But the practice of mindfulness and the practice of introspection can help strengthen mindfulness in a way that the energy that's going into these compulsive patterns is reduced, and the strength of the energy that's staying on our observation, on our object, can be strong enough that even if those thoughts start to emerge, then the mind can be aware of that. It's got the potential to being pulled off, or it has been pulled off, and then it can come back sooner. That's part of the fruit of what we are working with, right? Trying to be able to bring the mind back, trying to be able to move energy out of some of these habitual patterns of action, of body, speech, and mind, and move that energy into something that is more in line with whatever our spiritual aspirations are, right? So the goal of this in some ways is articulated in the Pali Canon, in the middle length discourses of the Buddha. There's the 20th sutra or sutta there is called the removal of distracting thoughts. I won't attempt to say the Pali because I won't. Don't know how, so I won't. But it's the sutta of the removal of distracting thoughts. At the end of this, the Buddha says, this bhikkhu who's been able to go through this process and is trained in these 5 different methods for being able to remove distracting thoughts, the bhikkhu is then called a master of the courses of thought. He will think whatever thought he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think. This is straight from the Buddha. This is possible. So the basic idea is through the practice of simple mindfulness. Sometimes we need to use other techniques to clear obstacles that we have, longstanding patterns of thought, or anger is arising too much, then we need to do other activities. We need to do practices that will help attenuate that anger. But the basic idea is through our simple practice of mindfulness and introspection, we can train our minds to come back and to come back and to come back. And eventually we can stay with our intended object. And that object can become more clear and vivid to our minds. And in that process, our mind becomes closer to what the Buddha was talking about, thinking whatever we wish to think, not thinking anything we don't wish to think. It's a step in that direction. Any comments on dullness or distraction? Okay. Yeah, Mary Jo, would you like to say something?
Well, I don't have a very articulate statement, but I think my life is full of distractions, especially distractions. And I sort of have had a tendency to.
Um, we can use the word distraction more loosely and more kind of precisely, right? And from what you were describing, um, in your case of observing your bird, the birds that are around you, um, like you were saying, you weren't single-pointedly trying to focus on the bird feeder or, a particular bird. So having the mind be able to move to whatever's there, it's more like it's closer to an open awareness type of practice, right? Um, which if we were trying to just hold that more open awareness and allow whatever is coming to mind come to mind and move out of mind, then in a sense the distraction would be getting fixated on any of the birds that come up, right? So um, so we can have distraction arise in practice in a variety of different ways depending on what we're trying to do with the practice, right? What we're trying to focus on. So, and I do think it's important to be, you know, more and more from my perspective, I try to look at the practice of Dharma as something that's very, very, very valuable, but it's also a long-term thing, right? And whatever steps I can take in this lifetime can be valuable, right? So there's danger sometimes when we're trying to practice concentration or mindfulness that we get too tight, right? And then other things happen as a result of that that are not what we're aspiring to, right? There's lots of stories of meditators who have gotten energetic imbalances or various other things that have happened from being really tight in meditative practice, right? So um, learning to have a clear aspiration, a clear intention, and doing the best we can, and really um, giving ourselves a lot of space and appreciation for what we are able to do, I think can be very valuable, right? And we don't get so locked in on the, I needed to accomplish that yesterday, right? We may have had that aspiration, but we get to learn to let it go because here's the tricky thing in a way, fixating on how we weren't able to accomplish it ends up being a distraction to being able to accomplish it. you know, it's part of working with distractions and dullness, which I'll talk about for, I think we'll talk about this next time. Shayla, yeah, did you have something you want to share?
I was just thinking that I think going off of Mary Jo's um, birds, the hummingbirds, and then was it the Oriole? And I think having that moment where you recognize that, oh, hey, that was an Ariel, and in rejoicing in that, and then and being grateful for that moment in time, and then bringing yourself back. I don't know. It seems like that might be, instead of that Oriole, made me lose my concentration. I think
Mhm.
to me, I think that I would much rather, I don't know, I would want to be, enjoying that moment first.
I think that's great. And I think you're really pointing to the practice is simply like something has come up. Okay, let's move our mind back, right? And why not be delighted in something that's beautiful and interesting and different, right? For the again, we're not in a I don't know of too many, like, or most of us are not in a competition to be concentrators. I'm not, I'll say. I don't think most of us are, right? We may have strong aspirations. We may really actually care about it and try to develop it, but it doesn't have to be a race. And we don't have to be so tight around it that we can't enjoy something that interrupts what's emerging for us, right? Or interrupts our practice, right? There's all sorts of other aspects of Dharma practice that go into a mind that's able to be open and flexible and accept, oh, something different is happening right now, right? I'm not going to go into that because it's outside of the scope of this kind of course, but it's, you know, having a long view, being okay with the imperfection, and maybe even like really learning to accept it and be at ease with it, um, can pay really, really valuable dividends in terms of cultivating our concentration or our mindfulness, right? You know, so much of the practice for us is simply bringing back. And the more opportunities we get to do that, the more practice we get to do. It can be frustrating, but it's, yeah. Mary Jo, can't hear you quite yet. There
Is
you
it
go.
time for another comment by me? Or are
Sure.
we short on time? I have no concept of time. Um, and regarding this period of time,
Let's
I
go for it.
I'd like to share. In Taos, near where I go sometimes, there's the Hanuman temple. And there they have a time in which the staff is preparing a very large lunch. And I have had the opportunity to go in sometimes, and it's very interesting in this area where people are chopping veggies. That's where the boss is, and I wanted to, ask him something maybe or tell him. And they used matram a great deal, I believe, and I think that's what those guys are doing is working and repeating their mantra silently to themselves. And we don't talk too much about use of a mantra, and I think that it can be also very useful in keeping a certain kind of focus.
Mhm.
So it's certainly impressive when I'm in there and wanting to ask something. They're clearly engaged in something besides chopping the veggies. And then it's like, then I say something and he looks up and in a moment will acknowledge me. So it's another interesting type of attention, I think. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, you're welcome. In Tibetan Buddhism, mantras are used as um, in a in a variety of ways, but they can facilitate the stability and concentration of the mind. Yeah, it's something that can be used for sure. Um, I think I will save working with distractions for next session, except for a practical experience of working with distractions as we concentrate on our breath for a little while. So we'll talk about how to work with our distractions. Um, yeah, I think it's enough. We don't have enough time to really um, cover much ground with that. So we'll save it for next week. maybe to start though, we can do a little experiment, and maybe this can be an experiment um, for you over the next week. So I didn't talk last week about suggested home practice, but um, for this week we can do meditation on our breath or a body scan, and really try to be aware of this quality of introspection or this mental factor of introspection that's paying attention to if the mind has moved off of its object, right? So let's focus a little bit on that. And this is a sort of a preemptive or front-loading way of working with distraction. We can cultivate the explicit aspiration in our practice as we're sitting down and about ready to start our meditation. I aspire to stay connected with my object. I aspire to stay mindful with my object or of my object, right? The basic idea of this is that we're directing the energy that we're trying to cultivate it to its specific, its activity, its task, right? And just see if doing that once or twice at the start has any effect on your practice. If you already do something like that, then, you can add another layer or something like that if you want to. It's one of the ways of like getting the energy kind of drawn in and focused a little bit. Yeah. So let's take some. This is going to be another short meditation. This is one of my liabilities. Sometimes I don't spend enough time with the practice. Next week, I aspire to do better. I should write that down by the end so I remember. Hard cutoff times on the talking. So let's find a comfortable meditation posture. Allow our body to relax into that. And reflect. I aspire to keep my awareness on my breath. And turn your attention to your awareness of your breath, wherever that may be for you. Could be your nostrils, your abdomen, wherever it is. And be mindful of your breath in that place. Notice what your mind is focused on now. And bring your awareness to your breath. With ease, notice your awareness again. Its object. And the quality of that awareness. And if you notice your mind moves away and becomes distracted, gently move it back. Return your awareness to your breath. Our awareness on our breath. You can consciously release that. And dedicate any benefit that arises, any virtue that arises, to our continued development of our awareness, of our mindfulness and introspection, and our host of other aspirations. So we have just a couple more minutes here today. The aspiration with the instruction to notice your awareness was to just cultivate that aspect of introspection. Initially, just being aware of where our mind is at. And then, if we had noticed it had moved off of our object, to bring it back. Right? Just to be able to gain a little familiarity with that awareness that we can have that doesn't disrupt our main object of observation, right? Doesn't take our mind away from what we were trying to focus on. It can be present with it, can be simultaneous with it, right? Simultaneously. It can be right there alongside it. We have time for maybe one share. maybe none. So maybe I'll add one other suggestion for home practice, since we will talk about dealing with distractions and dullness next time. Maybe spend a few more extra minutes or spend some time like thinking about the ways that you personally deal with your distraction or dullness, and then maybe what other ways you might think of that would be beneficial, right? Like, how else could you do it? What else have you heard? How would you like to expand your repertoire of things you do to work through distraction? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your attention this evening. It's been a joy to be with you, and I look forward to the next week. Um, and thank you, Sheila, for hosting this evening and the Buddhist Center as well. Thank you all. With that, we can bring to mind all the positive actions that we have engaged in this evening, all the positive actions of our peers. We can expand that to every single person that's ever been to the Buddhist Center and have heard of it. And we can dedicate the merit, so the transformative power of all of those positive actions, to the long life of our teachers, to our continued contact with the Dharma, the development of our minds, so that we may be of benefit to sentient beings. If you have a personal dedication, you can add that to yourself, to the universe from yourself. And thank you all so much for your time, your energy.